One of the most powerful and common emotions humans face is fear. It is a physiological response programmed into our brain long ago to help us survive in dangerous environments. However, when this fear is no longer triggered by real threats, it becomes a hindrance in life. Fear not only comes from dangerous situations but also from our own imaginations about what might happen in the future. This causes us to live in constant worry, avoiding challenges and opportunities in life. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, pointed out that fear is not an enemy but a teacher. Every fear carries a valuable lesson. For example, fear of failure can teach us resilience. Fear of rejection can help us recognize our self-worth, and fear of the unknown teaches us courage. When we understand that fear is just a part of our personal growth journey, we can more easily face and overcome it. What is important is not to avoid fear but to confront it. Being aware of our fear, acknowledging that it exists, and not allowing it to control us is the first step in overcoming it. When we face our fear, we begin to develop confidence and problem-solving skills, which lead us to personal growth and inner peace. Once we overcome our fears, we will see that life becomes freer, and we can live fully with what we desire. Fear plays an important role in everyone's life. It is a natural response of the body, helping to protect us from dangers and threats. However, fear does not always reflect reality. In fact, a large part of what we fear is just imagined stories our minds create. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, pointed out that fear is not an enemy but a lesson, a signal from our unconscious urging us to face and deal with it. While we are often haunted by fears that are not real, we forget that it is our imagination about what might happen that keeps us trapped. When faced with fear, we often come up with the worst-case scenarios, thinking that we will fail, be humiliated, or face disasters that, in reality, are not certain to happen. These thoughts only make us feel exhausted, anxious, and gradually form a vicious cycle of fear that we can't escape. Jung believed that instead of avoiding fears, we need to confront them and see them as opportunities to learn and grow. Changing our relationship with fear is the most important factor in overcoming it. Instead of seeing fear as something to fight against, we should view it as a sign to grow and change. We should see fear as a teacher, helping us learn from failures, uncertainties, and from ourselves. When we change our perception of fear, life becomes freer and less stressful. Fear no longer controls us, and we can live truly free, no longer limited by the negative imagination of our own minds. Fear does not only come from clear dangers but also from the unknown. This stems from human nature when facing uncertainty and lack of control. People tend to fear things that have not happened yet and imagine the worst possible outcomes, even though there is no evidence to confirm them. Carl Jung believed that this reflects one of the key aspects of human psychology, the need for control. To protect oneself from unidentified threats. When facing fear, people often create a series of worst-case scenarios in their minds, without realizing that those situations are often a product of their imagination. The fear of failure, rejection, or even death can sometimes be much greater than the event itself. In fact, people may not fear death, but rather the loss of identity, the disappearance of the self that they have built throughout their lives. Jung also believed that one of the reasons people are afraid is because they cannot accept the uncertainty of life. Life is a continuous series of changes, full of surprises, and when we cannot accept this change, fear begins to form. People who cannot face change often live in a state of anxiety and fear. Therefore, instead of avoiding it, we need to learn to face these changes and uncertainties, because that is the key to personal growth. Finally, Jung emphasized that fear is an inseparable part of the process of personal development. When we dare to face our fears, we not only grow personally but also achieve great accomplishments in life. English version: when facing fear, we don't always realize that we are the ones who create these fearful situations in our minds. In reality, the human mind is easily influenced by imagination, and we often make up terrible stories, imagining disastrous outcomes that may never happen. Carl Jung pointed out that fear is not an enemy but a valuable lesson. If you learn to face fear and not resist it, you will gradually realize that these fears are stepping stones to growth and freedom. Jung suggested that one of the most effective ways to overcome fear is by changing the way you perceive it. Instead of seeing it as an enemy, you should view fear as a teacher, teaching you about resilience, self-worth, and courage. Every fear carries a unique lesson that we can learn from. For example, the fear of failure builds perseverance. The fear of rejection helps us recognize our own value. And the fear of the unknown expands our courage and adaptability in life. In fact, the difference between those who live under the control of fear and those who master it lies in their relationship with it. The fearless are not those who are devoid of fear but those who know how to accept and face their fear. They don't try to avoid it but confront it and learn from it. Accepting fear is also a way to open up opportunities for change in life. Fear is not an obstacle, it is a signal for transformation and personal growth. When you no longer fear, you will no longer be bound by uncertainty and worry. And as a result, you can live a life that is free and meaningful. When we face fear, one of our natural reactions is to try to avoid it. However, Carl Jung pointed out that fear is not something to escape from, but something to confront and understand. We often let our fears control our actions, preventing us from trying new things or doing what we truly want. However, Jung emphasized that if we don't face our fears and find ways to overcome them, we will be imprisoned by the very fear itself. One of the most effective ways to confront fear is by taking small actions. Don't try to change everything at once. Instead, start with small steps to gradually get used to the discomfort and fear. When you take small actions that you fear, the fear will gradually diminish. Every small step you take is a victory and will make you feel stronger in the process of change. Jung also pointed out that the difference between those who succeed and those who fail at confronting their fears is their ability to change their attitude toward fear. Instead of seeing it as something negative, view it as a teacher, an opportunity to learn and grow. This mindset will help you break through the barriers you've created in your mind. When you start confronting and accepting your fears, you will realize that they are no longer as intimidating. In fact, it is the absence of fear and the acceptance of fear that will open up opportunities for you to change and grow. Don't let fear dominate your life. See it as part of your journey. And from there, you will find yourself freer, stronger, and more complete. Fear is often considered an enemy we must defeat. But Carl Jung believed that the real challenge lies in understanding fear and transforming it into a source of strength. In his view, fear is not something that should be banished or avoided, but rather something we must engage with and learn from. Fear is a natural part of life, and it is often a sign that we are on the edge of growth and transformation. The key, Jung suggests, is not to be fearless but to understand and embrace fear as a part of our journey. The first step in dealing with fear is to observe it. Recognizing fear as it arises allows us to separate ourselves from it. Instead of identifying with the fear, we can learn to acknowledge it without allowing it to define us. This act of observation creates space between us and our emotions, allowing us to look at them with a sense of clarity and objectivity. When we recognize fear for what it truly is, just a feeling, it loses much of its power over us. Furthermore, Jung teaches us that our fears often point to areas of our lives where we have not fully developed. For example, a fear of failure may highlight a lack of confidence in our abilities, while a fear of rejection could point to unresolved issues with self-worth. By facing our fears directly, we uncover the lessons they offer. Fear helps us recognize the areas where we need to grow, and by addressing those areas, we can become more whole and authentic. One powerful strategy for overcoming fear, according to Jung, is exposure. The more we avoid the things we fear, the stronger the fear becomes. However, by gradually confronting our fears in controlled environments, we can desensitize ourselves to them. This process, known as exposure therapy, allows us to build resilience and break free from the patterns of avoidance that often hold us back. In the end, fear is not a force to be feared, but a guide. When we learn to face fear with courage and curiosity, it transforms from an obstacle into a source of growth and empowerment. Instead of running from fear, we can embrace it, use it as a tool for self-discovery, and find the strength to move forward, even in the face of uncertainty. When faced with fear, we tend to run away and avoid it. But Carl Jung had a very different perspective. According to Jung, instead of trying to eliminate fear, We need to learn how to confront it and turn it into a part of our personal development. He believed that fear is not something that should be discarded, but rather a sign of latent growth, an invitation to reach higher potentials in life. Jung emphasized that every fear holds an important lesson. Whether it is the fear of failure, rejection, or the unknown, these feelings are not just signs of insecurity, they are opportunities for us to explore ourselves more deeply. For example, the fear of failure might reflect a lack of self-confidence in our abilities, while the fear of rejection could signal that we have not fully accepted ourselves. These emotions are hints from the mind that urge us to recognize the aspects of ourselves that still need development. Jung also pointed out that one of the most effective ways to confront and overcome fear is through gradual exposure. Instead of avoiding it, we need to familiarize ourselves with it in small steps, thereby building tolerance and resilience. This is the principle of exposure therapy, where each time we face our fear, we learn how to overcome it, gradually diminishing its power over us. Finally, Jung believed that fear is not the enemy but a companion on the path to growth. We can transform fear into motivation for development, rather than letting it control our lives. When we are no longer afraid, we become stronger individuals who know how to face challenges and walk through life with confidence. One of the key concepts that Carl Jung introduced in his theories is the growth zone, where real personal development takes place. This zone lies between the comfort zone and the panic zone. In the comfort zone, we feel safe with no risks, but at the same time, there is no growth. On the other hand, the panic zone is where anxiety and stress exceed our tolerance, leading to stagnation or even inaction. The key is to find the growth zone, where we can face challenges without feeling overwhelmed. Jung advises that in order to grow, we must dare to step out of our comfort zone. This does not mean facing dangerous or overwhelming situations. Instead, it is about finding ways to face manageable challenges, ones that make us a little anxious but not paralyzed by fear. In doing so, we build resilience and maturity without facing failure or panic. Jung also points out that real growth comes from accepting our imperfections. During the process of growth, we will encounter weaknesses and mistakes. However, rather than avoiding or denying these flaws, we must accept them as an essential part of our journey. When we can accept our imperfections, we are better equipped to face life's challenges and find inner peace. In life, one of the key elements to overcoming fear is community. Fear thrives in isolation when we keep our worries to ourselves without sharing them with anyone. But when we share our fears with others, their power diminishes significantly. Jung argued that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. When we share our fears, they can no longer control us. The support from those around us helps us face fear with less pressure, allowing us to grow and become stronger. Jung also emphasized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. Courage is acting despite feeling afraid. It doesn't mean not feeling fear, but choosing to face it because of the ideals or values we believe in. Brave people are not those who are fearless, but those who know how to overcome it. And this kind of courage can be nurtured over time. Jung pointed out that some of the most important decisions in life are driven by facing our greatest fears. Figures like Rosa Parks, who stood up against racial segregation, did so despite being afraid. The key is to act in spite of fear and create change. Fear will always exist in our lives, but what matters is how we choose to confront it and find strength in that very vulnerability. When facing fear, the most important thing is to accept it as a part of life rather than trying to defeat it. According to Carl Jung, fear is not an enemy but a teacher, a guide that helps us grow. Once we learn to face and understand our fears, they no longer have control over us. Instead of running away, we can learn from fear and use it as a tool for progress. As Joseph Campbell said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." This means that what we fear most is often where the greatest change and growth lie. In reality, every time we face a great fear, we don't just survive, we evolve and become stronger. Those challenging moments, when we step out of our comfort zone and face the unknown, are when true transformation happens. The small steps in confronting fear, such as speaking in front of a crowd or trying a new job, can help us build confidence and handle difficult situations. Moreover, We cannot change our lives if we do not change how we approach fear. One helpful strategy is fear setting, a method that helps identify fear and analyze the worst-case scenarios, thereby reducing its power. When we confront what scares us directly, we realize that it is often not as terrifying as we once thought. Finally, it's crucial to maintain inner peace. By accepting that fear is a natural part of life, we can face it with more patience and calmness. When we no longer let fear dominate, life becomes freer, and we can move forward without being hindered. When we learn to face and accept fear, it's important to recognize that fear is not something to be completely eliminated, but rather a natural part of personal growth. Fear acts as a signal from the unconscious, guiding us toward challenges we need to overcome in order to mature. Instead of fearing and avoiding it, facing fear head-on helps us grow stronger. One helpful strategy in overcoming fear is fear setting, defining our fears and imagining the worst possible scenarios. This not only reduces the intensity of our fear but also clarifies that what we worry about is often not as terrifying as we think. This preparation fosters confidence and eases anxiety. Moreover, it's essential to learn to accept the uncertainty of life. Fear often stems from uncertainty and the worry about things we cannot control. But when we begin to accept this uncertainty and instead of fighting it, learn to move with it, life becomes much easier. Like great thinkers such as Carl Jung, we must face the darker parts of ourselves, those aspects that society or ourselves have tried to ignore or suppress. Fear is not just something that weakens us, but an opportunity to confront parts of ourselves that are yet to be discovered. When we are ready to learn from fear and view it as part of life, we will find true strength and freedom. In life, facing uncertainty and underlying fears is an essential part of our personal growth journey. One of the keys to overcoming fear and finding true freedom is acceptance and understanding of instability. When we stop resisting uncertainty and instead learn to embrace it, we begin to experience inner peace and freedom within ourselves. Fear often originates from things beyond our control, such as failure, rejection, or unforeseen situations. But when we stop and confront it, rather than trying to avoid it, we realize that the fear we experience has no power over our lives unless we allow it. In fact, what we fear might not be as terrible as we imagine. A helpful technique for overcoming fear is the fear setting method. This technique allows us to view fear from a different perspective, reducing anxiety and worry. When we imagine the worst possible outcomes and realize that they are not the disasters we once thought, we can approach fear with a calmer mindset. Ultimately, fears are often signals of an opportunity to confront and overcome. True growth happens when we step outside our comfort zones and face the uncertain. Successful people are not those who are not afraid, but those who know how to accept and face their fears, thus finding strength and the ability to overcome challenges in life. Fear often influences how we perceive life and limits our ability to take action. However, what's interesting is that this fear is often not as terrifying as we imagine. In reality, fear is a natural part of being human, and if we can confront it proactively, we can break down mental barriers and move forward. When you begin to realize that fear is simply a physiological and psychological response, you'll see that worrying about the outcome only causes you to miss out on opportunities. One of the most effective ways to face fear is by acknowledging and understanding that all fears can be broken if we don't let them control our lives. Our fears might be a product of imagination, sometimes excessive thinking without factual basis. In this way, you can learn to calm your fears and return to making wise decisions. One effective technique is fear setting. This technique allows you to outline what you're afraid of and view it objectively. You'll realize that what you worry about is not always the worst thing that can happen. And often, fear itself is an opportunity for growth. When you face fear and deal with it, you become stronger, more confident, and clearer about yourself. Finally, facing the things you're afraid of can open up new doors in life, allowing you to discover hidden potential within yourself that you never thought possible. Growth doesn't come from avoiding fear, but from accepting it and learning from the challenges fear brings. One of the key elements in overcoming fear is changing how we perceive it. When fear is faced head-on, we realize that what we fear may actually hold untapped potential, an opportunity for growth and transformation. No one can completely eliminate fear from their life, but learning how to confront it and understand it helps us live freely and break through mental barriers. When faced with major fears, instead of avoiding them, we can adopt the fear to grow approach, a mindset that allows us to embrace challenges, risks, and failures as valuable lessons. This may seem contradictory, but in reality, these challenges help us sharpen our resilience, build patience, and develop the qualities necessary to achieve long-term success. Only when we step outside our comfort zone, confront difficulties, and face our fears can we truly grow. We need to recognize that every challenge is an opportunity for development. When we feel afraid, that's the moment we need to approach the challenge rather than running away from it. Fear won't disappear on its own, but if we face it courageously, it becomes the strength that propels us forward in life. There is nothing more fearful than being afraid of ourselves, of not daring to act, and of missing out on opportunities. If we overcome fear, every door will open. Fear is an inseparable part of every human's life, and learning how to face it is the key to personal growth. The important thing is to recognize that fear is not an enemy to be defeated but a companion to understand. When we see fear this way, we realize that it is the driving force that pushes us forward, rather than holding us back. Every time we face fear, we realize that courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite feeling anxious. Fear does not always bring negative outcomes. In fact, it can help us become more alert, better prepared, and avoid unnecessary risks. The important thing is that we don't let fear control our actions but learn how to master it. Only when we face and master fear can we truly grow and change. One effective way to reduce anxiety is to apply the method of putting fear in its proper place. This means we need to recognize the things that make us anxious, think about them rationally, and find ways to address them one by one. When we no longer let fear dominate our minds, we will be able to make clearer and more confident decisions in life. Thus, confronting fear is not just a mental struggle, it is a journey of self-awareness and the development of life skills. Courage comes from stepping out of our comfort zones and facing the unknown. Fear will never completely disappear, but we can learn to live with it and use it as a motivation to move forward. Fear is a natural emotion that is an inseparable part of every person's life. But the key is not letting it control us. Fear is not something to avoid, but rather an integral part of our journey towards self-growth and development. To face and overcome fear, we must recognize that fear is not just an enemy. At times, it serves as a teacher, a signal that alerts us to areas of our lives that need change or growth. When facing what scares us, instead of letting fear dominate, we should view it as an opportunity to learn, grow, and progress. Courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite feeling anxious. Facing fear and taking action despite it will gradually help us break through our self-imposed limits, develop self-confidence, and grow stronger. One important lesson is that rather than avoiding what we fear, we should learn to understand and master it. When we no longer let fear control our lives, we find inner peace and make better decisions. Ultimately, fear will never completely disappear, but if we learn to face it and learn from it, we will come closer to true freedom and live a meaningful life.